A lot of businesses think that they need marketing, but that's not what it is at all. There's a lot of holes in a boat, and let's use businesses as boats, where if they don't clog up the right holes, any marketing that you do, it's not going to be effective. So for example, people would come to me and say, I need more marketing. I'm like, well, I just called your receptionist and they didn't pick up the phone. So I can send leads there, but if you're not picking up the phone, there's no point. And what I found with a lot of construction companies is that they're coming home at night, they're focusing on the skill all day, they have 10, 12-hour days, and then they're not focusing on the business part of it. And they're missing, this is where like the Titanic came in and they hit an iceberg. And they're not focusing on the business piece of it, which I understand because you're tired at the end of the day. And there's a lot of things within that we could do to fix that.
Hello everybody, Gavin Coyle, I'm the Gaffer, is back again with another great guest. This week I'm talking to Erika Jujo, and Erika is based in Toronto in Canada, and she has a great background in the whole area of lean and lean management, and I'm interested to talk to her because she's working through a model that is kind of like a franchise model. So she's an independent business owner within the construction space in her own right, but it's through a franchise model, which is very, very intriguing to me to see, you know, if you're a construction owner and maybe you might be looking for a change of career and maybe you want to set up your own business, but you don't want to have all of the learnings that you have to get up to speed with in order to run a business. And maybe a franchise model might be one that would fit for you because obviously the model will be built by somebody else and the systems will be built by somebody else. And then you can focus on your core expertise. And this is where Erika has really niched out a really interesting product and business for herself. And so for that, Erika, we're delighted to have you on the show today. So welcome to I'm the Gaffer.
And Gavin, thank you so much for having me. I'm super excited to go into quite a few things today.
So am I. All things lean it rings a bell for me, but like, can you give the listeners a sense of where your background, where you came from in terms of your career progression?
Okay, so this is a bit of a long one, but I went to university thinking I was going to go into urban planning. And at the time, I loved it. I still love it to this day, being able to look at certain cities. And where I got inspiration from is I traveled quite a bit in Europe. And I looked at how the cities and communities were designed. And I said, why haven't we brought that over here? And it inspired me to go into that field. But what I realized is that there's a lot of politics and certain things that you want to get established or done for a community doesn't always happen that way. Then I bridged into marketing, thinking, okay, let's go into the space. I ended up selling a lot of marketing packages for companies. But what I realized there is a lot of businesses think that they need marketing, but that's not what it is at all. There's a lot of holes in a boat, and let's use businesses as boats, where if they don't clog up the right holes, any marketing that you do, it's not going to be effective. So for example, people would come to me and say, I need more marketing. I'm like, well, I just called your receptionist and they didn't pick up the phone. So I can send leads there, but if you're not picking up the phone, there's no point. And what I found with a lot of construction companies is that they're coming home at night, they're focusing on the skill all day, they have 10, 12-hour days, and then they're not focusing on the business part of it. And they're missing, this is where like the Titanic came in and they hit an iceberg. And they're not focusing on the business piece of it, which I understand because you're tired at the end of the day. And there's a lot of things within that we could do to fix that. Hence why I moved from marketing to then the franchising model. And what I realized is that, okay, this is a gap that we can fix. And if we fix it and we're able to put money back into your business, give you back into your time, you can do all the other stuff.
So it's kind of like an outsourcing model, is it, Erika, in terms of, if I'm a business owner, say I have 25, 50 people working for me, and I'm not good at the sort of the administration, I'm not good at the finance, I'm not great at the marketing, and I'm just not good at paperwork. Is that what we're looking at here? Is that what the service offers, or how fast, or what is the package?
That's exactly how it works. So we're like that additional team member. We're there, but we're like a ghost in a sense. So we come in and we say, hey, listen, we're going to look at some of your expenses. So we'll look at your waste management companies, also your vendors, your merchant services. That's a big one also in construction, believe it or not. Your telecom, your fuel, compressed gases. And we come in and we say, we're not going to be an employee, but we're going to be like a contractor that works for you 2 to 3 hours out of this entire year. And it takes 4 to 6 weeks to come back with our numbers, but we come up with what's called like a value report, and we show you where you're getting dinged on those services or where people are overcharging you. And especially in waste management and merchant services, there's quite a bit of savings there.
Wow. So merchant services, you're talking about on the visa bills, or what? What are you talking about when you say merchant? Are you talking about the builders merchants as well?
I don't work with builder merchants per se, but I do work with so merchant services as in like your POS system and the credit cards. So where there's a lot of savings there is number one, the interchange fees. And also number two, there's a big global fee. So you and I are in 2 different parts of the world. But if I'm doing business in London and I live in London, why am I paying a global fee? I'm not an e-commerce store, right? Where you can buy things and get things shipped abroad. So there's a way to actually get rid of that fee, but there's a negotiation involved to be able to do that. And it's not as simple as ABC. The interchange fees are also very interesting because where a lot of credit cards make money and where a lot of people are getting their points from is actually from merchants because they have to pay to use the machine. So what we try to do is as it goes up, encourage them to say, hey, you know what? Let's, instead of maybe making it 4%, let's go down to 3% or offer a cash discount. Even though I'm in the business to say, hey, we're going to help you reduce your merchant fees, I try to encourage people as much as possible, go cash. Yeah, I mean, you have to, of course, you got to pay taxes on it. But let's say, for example, you've got a black Amex and let's say you're the contractor and I say, hey, you know what, Gavin, I'd like to split up these payments and let's say it's $100,000 job. So I give you my black Amex and I pay in installments. Even though I had to pay a fee to be able to use that black Amex, for me to use that on your machine, or if you get the chip that's at the top of your phone, you have to pay for my points.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. So when you're talking 100,000 plus and, you're looking at 4%, that's a pretty big number.
Yeah. So even like, I'm not sure how it is in London, but here I'll go to a restaurant and I'm thinking to myself, or even like McDonald's, right? Or McCafe. And every time I go and I get a coffee, it'll say, do you want to leave a tip? So here's the other piece of it too. They're trying, because of inflation, they're saying to customers, do you want to leave a tip? So if you leave a tip, they're trying to accommodate for the high merchant fees now, but that actual tip is not going to the employees. It's going to pay for the machine.
Stop. Oh my God. I hope we're not going to get sued now by McDonald's over over the tips. Disclaimer: This is not Gavin Coyle advice, but I understand totally. There's charges on the credit card, but it's like I know it's only that you say it now. I'm sure there's plenty of people listening to this going, "Yeah, I just pay the credit card bill, or I pay the bill through the credit card." But we don't actually try and look and challenge the credit card companies to give us back value because we think we're locked into this some sort of contractual obligation that we have to just pay it and that's just the way it is. So do the banks stand up and listen? These credit card merchants, how approachable are they in this regard? And do you make that contact?
So the banks are in on it, because how it works is you have the end user. So let's say you're the end user as a customer. Your credit card is linked to a bank. And then the merchant has the POS system, and then they have their own bank. So it goes through 4 or 5 intermediaries before actually something happens. So the banks are in on it because they're also making money.
So everybody's taking a kick before you actually get kicked to the curb. So, but back to my question: do you guys step in and do that negotiation? And how does that negotiation happen, or what does that look like?
So first thing that we do is we look at why you need a merchant terminal, how much you're doing on it per month, who your current vendor is. So a lot of people will just say, "Oh, I'm going to use Stripe because they're trusted. It integrates with a lot of different tools." We look at the vendor and we say, "Okay, where in that bill can we find savings?" Or maybe sometimes you're already doing a good job. If you're doing a good job, great job. But we'll go in there, we look at the fine print. We look at so here's the other piece too. A lot of people think they're in a contract. There's ways out of it. We look at your interchange fees, and essentially every line item, we're looking to see if that applies to your business. A lot of things don't apply to a certain business. Like I mentioned about the global fee. If you're a contractor, you're probably not going to be doing business in Australia if you're in Canada, right? So that's a fee that can be removed. Then what we'll do is we also look at our vendors. So just because like Stripe is like the top one, it's a brand. It's like Mercedes. You're paying for a brand, but you can drive any kind of car. So we look within our 3,700 vendors and we say, "Hey, listen, this is what they're being offered. Can you do better?" And we have those relationships with our vendors to be able to provide what I like to call like the Walmart pricing. And they'll go in and say, "Here's what we can offer, and here are some of the terms or what we're looking at." And then that's how the negotiation happens. But there's a window between like 4 to 6 weeks to make that happen. There's a lot of, I would say, back and forth. Within that too, we have to speak on your behalf. So sometimes we have to get like voice recognition, pieces like that. But we're looking at each and every line item. And when you think about it, let's say your telecommunications bill. So here in Canada, our telecommunications is like stupid high in terms of pricing. And what they'll do is they'll say, "Oh yeah, here's like $2.13 to call like the US." But someone would say, "Oh, that's only $2.13. Whatever, I'll just pay it." But when you're a business, there's not just $2.13. There's a lot more to it. And then let's say you have, more than one terminal, or you're more than, let's say, 25 employees, or maybe each employee has a terminal. That adds up at the end of the year.
Absolutely. I think it's fascinating. I think it's something that I wouldn't have thought of that much. I know we all try to get value, and we all try to get, the best price we can get for whatever we want. But then we tend to move on, don't we? There's a mindset or behavioral concept where once you've kind of done that deal with the bank or with the merchant, you kind of just accept it then and move on. You don't really do review. So would you guys do an annual review every year with the company? Or how does once you're on board and a sort of client, how does that operate?
So we do a yearly review, but what I like to do is sometimes even quarterly, just to see like what's going on. Sometimes people increase their employees, decrease their employees. There can be some internal changes. I like to think of ourselves as your stockbroker or your wealth advisor. Things are going to go up, things are going to go down, and you got to be able to make those changes. And those are things that I want to know. And as I mentioned, you might have a contract But if you have 10 more employees, I'm going to go back and negotiate for you so you can get, let's say, 10 more cell phones. Why wait? Why wait till the end of the year?
Well, like the credit card, go back to the credit card. The credit card, like you can just imagine every small to medium enterprise construction owner going into a builder's, provider's, supplier, and the first thing that comes out is a credit card, because, you know, not everybody has a credit account, I suppose, and then, you know, they are paying the extra bit of money for the fact that they don't have a trade account. Some of them might have a trade account, but they don't have good enough terms, so they're being still told to use the credit card until such a stage as they're over a certain value. So, like, if you're not spending any more than probably 10 grand a month or something like that, a supplier, some of these builders, merchants won't give you a trade account. What's your experience in terms of negotiating with trade suppliers?
So the value would be, I would say 20 and up. 20,000 and up to really see like that big difference. But you can, I would even say like we can work with 10, but really where you're going to see that big difference and where we can negotiate quite a bit is 20 and up.
20 and up. And then in your experience, would that be kind of saying, look, you're not going to we don't want you to use that trade supplier anymore. We want you to use another supplier that we have that operates in the same space, that's maybe 2 hours up the road, but they're still a lot cheaper, or do you try and just keep the same relationships, or what's your experience in there?
So I asked the contractor and the person, the decision maker. And to be honest, I actually try to keep those current relationships that they already have, because they've built the credibility. They've probably been doing some business back and forth. But most people, I would say when we come back with our value report, they're like, this guy was my friend and look what he's charging me. This is not a friend. So it kind of depends on the person and the business. But if you have that local relationship and you want to keep it, we are gonna look at that, and we are gonna negotiate as well on your behalf if we find something better.
Yeah, it's interesting because we had a guy on the show a while back, and he worked in the area of merchant supplier, builder supplier to the trades, and we were talking kind of about hedging as well, like hedging on timber, for example, because obviously when COVID hit, insulation prices went through the roof, timber went through the roof. And he was kind of making the case that, you can go back to these builder suppliers and say, look, I buy X amount of timber off you every year. Chances are I'm going to buy the same next year and probably more. So why don't you give me a fixed price for the next 24 months so that I know I can build that into my model? I thought it was very powerful.
Oh, absolutely. And even in Toronto, so building supplies have gone up 30%, which is crazy. So if let's say you're building an apartment building, what that person, they actually build it into the contract now. If I were to go buy a condo or like an apartment, let's say you buy it for $500,000, they have a clause in there that if it gets delayed or the building materials go up, you have to have a budget now to accommodate for that 30%, which is crazy, because if, I'm scraping the ground and I'm saying, I'm doing all this work and this is all I can afford, 30% is a big difference.
So the listeners get that. So the consumer picks up the tab for the increase in the materials or the overrun or the delays. Is that what you're saying?
In a lot of projects, yes. And what's happening is that they have a lot of buildings now where if they're only selling like 20%, or a lot of people are backing out of their deals. It has gotten so bad. There was this one building in Toronto that I think it was like for the first 100 people, like it was like a certain number. They built a Porsche into the price. Yeah, I thought it was fake, and I was like, okay, this is too good to be true. And then so many people were on Instagram were posting about it, because that's how you know how bad it is.
Wow. Jeez. That's crazy. That just blows my mind. So go back to I'm really interested in your background. You've obviously got the marketing. You've you know how to tell a story. You've got obviously a lot of skill sets. Why construction?
I feel that construction, I think for me, it was more of a passion in the beginning, because I liked the designing, the urban planning, and somehow I made my way back to it. But I think it comes down to, I've noticed they just need a lot of help. And I don't know how the schools are in the UK, but here they're very focused on how do we pour the concrete? When do we pour the concrete? But when they leave the job site, they don't teach you about business. And I saw so many things where I just shake my head. I'm like, really? Like, you could be 10 times where you are today if you had the time, or if you had the mindset or the skills to focus on those pieces. I'll give you an example. We had one really big construction company that they had 4 different job sites or projects at the time. So some of the employees had 4 different phones. And I'm thinking to myself, why do you need 4 different phones? Either you're doing something shady, or you have an extra girlfriend or 2 girlfriends on the side. But what it really was is that the architects and the engineers fight with the people on the ground on how to build. And there's and also another big disconnect there. So when I saw that gap and that lack of communication, I said to myself, construction is where I need to be and where I need to help. And they're, like I said, when they go home at the end of the night, and a lot of us are the same way. When you work a 10-hour, 12-hour day, lifting things, hands up in the air like this, working with electrical, you just want to sit down, open Netflix, and eat your dinner, and that's it. And when you don't focus on the other pieces of it, that's where things go missing. You're not filing taxes properly. You get yourself in trouble. Like safety compliance. There's all those other aspects that they're missing. And out of all the industries, I would say this is one where there's a big gap.
Yeah, and they'll employ probably a carpenter or a bricklayer or an electrician before they'll take on, maybe an in-house accountant or, another administrator or an office manager or something like that. That's in my experience, it's always been reactive in the sense of, well, I need the trade first because the trade person is actually going to build me the job. But who manages the books? Who manages the marketing? Who manages the admin? Who manages safety? Who manages credit control, purchasing, procurement, all that good stuff? And, your overheads is what's going to kill you, really, at the end of the day. They're the ones that don't really get factored in. And is that your experience as well? In the small to medium enterprise market, they focus more on, I know how much the trade is going to cost me, and I know how much I need to price this job on based on hours, but they don't really probably nail down the figures of the overheads.
That is absolutely correct. And the saddest part, which you mentioned earlier, is they'll think to themselves, I need a carpenter, I need an electrician, or, a trade to finish off the job. But some of them, when you're looking at the books at the end of the day, they're making less than the person that they hired.
That's right.
Because of all the overhead.
And a lot of people listening to this will agree to that. And that's not the first time that's been said on the podcast. That people have went home and kind of said to themselves, what am I doing this for? The guys don't have any of the stress. They don't have any of the risk. They just turn up on the job site with their tools and off they go. And, you know, the poor business guy kind of maybe fell into setting up his own business because a bigger client might have said, look, you know, we could give you a load of work here. Why don't you just pull a couple of guys together, you know, set up your own company and we'll give you, you know, 200,000 or 500,000 a year of work to keep you going. And of course, everybody, well, why wouldn't you do that? Because you're thinking straight away, oh my God, I never made that money in my life. You're not making that money. Not making that money. That's the utopian dream that was painted to you at the start going in. But like a lot of guys will probably resonate with this and go, yeah, I thought I was going to be making in around 500,000 a year, but that 500,000 has turned into insurance, other trades coming in, you know, and all the other goods, all the stuff that goes in it, a van, a Jeep, a car, a teleporter, whatever it is, hiring pieces of plant and equipment. And before you know it, you could be lucky to come out with 25,000 of a salary, if you don't have the maths right. So you're fixing that problem.
Yes, I'm fixing the procurement part of the problem, which once that piece of it gets fixed, then you could also, because now you have more money in your pocket, you can focus on either saying, hey, you know what? Now I have more money in my pocket. I'm going to play golf on Fridays. Or you might say, you know what? Now I have this chunk of money, 25,000, 30,000, whatever we find, to invest in other parts. And one other thing that I do too is I try to encourage them, because once someone says, or I ask, what are you struggling with right now? It's like a whole therapy session comes out and they're like, okay, this, I will make a recommendation to say, hey, you know what? Maybe go talk to this person, you know, or go talk to this person. And I think the really great part about what we can do is I only need 2 to 3 hours of your time a year, if that.
A year? In a whole year?
In a whole year. So some people will say, okay, well, if I hire you, then I got to pay you 50,000, right? And to be in an office, and you need benefits and pension and all that stuff.
As in a full-time worker, yeah.
Full-time work. And then you got to onboard, like, especially if, you know, there's a lot of other HR implications. But when you hire like a consultant or a little bit of outside help, you don't have to worry about those things. They just need to know what's going on, maybe a few papers here and there, and that's it.
But it has to be more than 3 hours. Come on, like you couldn't do it in 3 hours. Seriously?
Yeah, because all I need is, for the first 30 minutes, is just to understand where you are in your business.
Okay.
What do you want to slice? Then I just need some paperwork. So basically to say, hey, we're going to dive into your expenses. There's like a paper that we sign. It's like a letter of authorization. They give us all of the vendor paperwork, and then we just come back to present, and that's it.
Sorry, yeah. So the direct cost is 3 hours, but you've got to go away and do the research and do the back office stuff, which is obviously going to be more than 3 hours. So
of course it's going to be more than 3 hours, but I just need 3 hours of their time. So think of it this way, 3 hours, I just need 3 hours of their time. And if I can save a company 21,000, 50,000, 100,000, divide 3 hours by those numbers and see what you get back in money and back in time.
And you know where to go to find this money, because you have a blueprint from working with other construction companies of where the commonality of problems is.
Of course, we've worked with a lot of different construction companies, roofing, HVAC, contractors, electricians. There's a commonality across the board, and there's a commonality in terms of the services. Not everyone needs compressed gases. Not everyone needs waste management to get rid of stuff off of the yard. But Yeah, we know where to look. We know, and we also, because we have those existing relationships, we even know sometimes too what they need and what they don't need.
So what's your understanding or what's your experience of these guys then staying with you? Because like, oh my God, like if you can make a saving for me this year of up to 50,000, why wouldn't I have you as my sort of lean management expert or cost reduction expert? Like, what's your experience of people then? Would they just have an ongoing relationship with you, or is it just ad hoc?
So how it works? Well, technically there's two ways to do it. We can do it either or. If you're, let's say, just getting started in the construction space, we can do what's called like a couple hours of consulting. We look at a particular category and we find those, we get you started essentially. What most people choose is the second option, which would be the free comprehensive audit of the expenses. And we find those different pieces. With that being said, it's like a stockbroker. If you go to a new stockbroker every single year, you're probably not going to make the money that you want to see at the end of those years, because that next person has to learn about you, your risk tolerance, all of that stuff. So how it works is when you're on the free audit side and when we save you those expenses, it's around 3 years, right? That it's like a car lease. Now with that, we're with you every step of the way. We have our quarterly meetings. 80% of our clients stay with us because, again, if every year, if I'm saving you $50,000 and it's 3 hours of work or of their time, that's like that. Even for me, that's, I wish before I even got into this business, I wish I knew about this, because you don't have to hire somebody else.
So do you leverage then internal people within your team that actually, comes together and work, within a sort of a working group, if you like?
Absolutely. So at head office, there's around 250 people. So give or take, there's around 12 analysts in every single category. So merchant services, telecom, tough. We have this thing. It's an acronym called tough. So it's like uniforms and linens. And for each category, they know how to negotiate within their category in certain pieces. Because someone like myself, there's no way I would be able to go to those 3,700 vendors. So along with me, you're getting 250 analysis.
Yeah.
That are saying, oh, we already know how these people negotiate or who to talk to. I want this off the bill. And I want it today, not tomorrow.
Wow. That's brilliant. So tell me a bit about Schooley Mitchell then. What is Schooley Mitchell as a company? Is it just construction, or do they have other industries? How did you find yourself into this franchise model? Because that's what it is, isn't it, Schooley Mitchell?
Yes. So very interesting. I found myself in the franchise model in a couple different ways. So I actually used to work for another franchise called WSI. And through WSI, I met other franchise brokers. And at the time I said, you know what, I'm just going to do some vending machines just on the side. And then, you know what, maybe I'll bridge into something later on. Talked to a franchise consultant. Then I got into contact with this girl called Cody Sanchez. So she's out in the States. She runs 50 businesses and she calls them boring businesses, laundromats, hotels, restaurants. And I kept listening to her and her podcast. And I'm thinking to myself, how does she run 50 businesses? And she said, number one, there's so many people. There's a tsunami of people that are retiring that have built systems and processes in place. And if you can buy into the business and they teach you a few things, like you have your business set up. Second thing that she said was the franchise model. And the franchise model, when things are built out for you, not everything is going to be perfect. Like, you do have to do I would say one of the downsides, and I'll be honest, is the marketing side of things. But when you have an HR system in place, when you have they're like coaches, they'll be your cheerleaders. When you have the branding, the logo, something that's well known in place, it's very hard for you not to succeed. So I can't remember the exact stats, but 80% of businesses fail after, I can't remember if it's between 5 years or 10 years.
No, it's in the first 5 years.
First 5 years. Okay. Yeah. With franchising. I don't know if it's
80%, but it's definitely a big number. Yeah, it's definitely a big number.
Okay. Now listen to this. So now with franchising, it's only 22% that fail.
In the first 5 years. Wow.
Because there's a system in place. Yes, you have to invest, of course. But if you have here's the other thing too, you have a community of people that let's say you're in Atlanta and you've got someone in Portland. They're not competition to you. So they're going to say, okay, here's what I did wrong. Here's where I succeeded. And the person that I bought the franchise off of, so he's a broker, he introduced me to somebody else that's also a broker. He has, I can't remember if it's 7 or 8 home professional franchises. So there's painting, there's what is it called? Like
carpet cleaning and all this kind of stuff, isn't it? Like, yeah.
So many different ones. And when he told me the numbers, I think it was like 17 or 18 million that he does in a year, which is, that's crazy. That's nuts.
Isn't it? Oh my God. I like the other thing, the other thing what you were saying there is like, you've got this very strong and powerful peer group that you can connect into. So it's a peer-to-peer learning. So I'm sure you obviously meet up with the other franchise owners in the other regions as well, or there's some way of communicating with them, or do you share contacts? So if somebody maybe had a contact in Toronto that was a construction company, would your franchise agency in New York give you the contact for Toronto? Or how do you communicate with the rest of the community is what I'm trying to say.
The franchise community or the
other franchise owners?
So I connect with, well, first in Schooley Mitchell, every year we have conferences. So even with WSI, they also had a conference every year. So you get to meet people personally. You can even go in, and sometimes I'll just go on LinkedIn and I'll connect to them. I'll say, hey, glad to meet another Schooley Mitchell person. Love to connect and learn more about what you're doing and what's working and what's not working. I'm a big proponent of Facebook groups. So even on the construction side, it's my way of knowing what's going on in any industry, because you'll see all these articles, you'll see, all these newsletters that get posted, but until you hear what they're actually going through, that to me is a community. That to me helps me understand what's going on.
And so what's the criteria then for it to be accepted into the franchise? Like, do you have to put up a certain amount of capital yourself, or is there a validation sort of verification due diligence process, or how do they select?
That's a great question. So each franchise is going to be different. Now, here's one of the good news is you don't have to go to school to be a franchise owner. That's for most of the franchises, because you're an owner. You're not, let's say if you're a chiropractor, of course you're going to have your certification, or if you're an electrician, of course you're going to have a partner that's going to have that certification or that piece of paper. The biggest thing that they look for, and what the 2 franchise brokers told me, is you gotta be proactive. So and what I always thought was you reach out to, let's say, like a Baskin Robbins or a McDonald's to say, hey, I'd love to open up a McDonald's. But that's not how it, like, and if you go on the website and you fill out the forms, it's not, I don't want to say unlikely that you're not going to get it, but it's very unlikely that you're not going to get it. Yeah. You have to, by going through a broker, you're more likely to get that spot because they have those existing relationships and they're going to push you through. It's kind of like buying, it's like if you buy a house and you don't have a real estate agent, you need that intermediary to make that deal happen. And there's things that are going to be missing along the way that you want to make sure is the best fit. But if you go to France, and for those that are listening, go to franserve.com. You'll be able to see all of the franchises. They have like 800 in there, and get in contact with a broker. But really that's business. You know, you have to, if I didn't go out and get clients, think about how many times people are going to reach out to you. It's probably not going to be as good. You have to, when you get up in the morning, you got to go. You got to work for it. You got to hustle for it. And you have to show that you're willing to do that.
Well, and did you just pick construction as your niche? Or I'm sure Scully Mitchell is not just, focused on construction.
So how it works within Scully Mitchell is I wasn't even in construction to begin with at all. And we don't have territories. So how it works is if I work with a certain business or I'm talking to a certain business, I put it in the system so that nobody else can go in and start having conversations with them, which is fair because you don't want to talk to 5 of us at once. And how I got, and I mentioned a little bit about how I got into construction, but it's encouraged that you pick a niche. So think of, and this is a great example. You can be a jack of all trades, but how many times are you going to call the person that's a jack of all trades to do certain things? You want someone to specialize. And the other piece of it too is, and we talked about this earlier, you and I have a lot of connections in common. Why? Because we focused on one niche. So if I need a lawyer now that focuses on construction and construction law, I know who to go to. Versus if someone were to say, yeah, I do this and I do this and I do this. By the end of next week, I already forgot about them and I don't even know what to put in my CRM system or my Excel sheet to actually say, hey, like, here's what they specialize in.
Well, it's true what they say, like there's riches and niches.
Yep.
And it's very true. It's very, very true. And as well as that, what I learned for what it's worth is there's different language in different industries, in different trades or different sectors, if you like. And construction has its own unique set of language. And if you're not talking the same language, you're not getting a vibe for what's happening in the industry, and you're not resonating with your customer.
Exactly. So another, I guess you can say, key piece of it is when I first got into it, I knew that there was going to be a lot of, when you talk about the language, even swearing involved. And even now, like throughout, I sound like it sometimes when I'm talking to certain people, I'm like, okay, here comes, I put my trucker or my sailor language on and they're like, okay, there we go. We know you work in construction.
Yeah, I have to mind myself every now and again as well. I'm the same. You have something for so this podcast obviously is in YouTube as well, so people could be watching this. So you have something for the listeners and the viewers in terms of sort of a gift of your own to give to them. What is that? If you can share that with us, Erika.
Oh, absolutely. So I'm willing to give out a free comprehensive analysis where we look at 12 categories of your procurement. So merchant services, telecom, shipping, we've got waste management, and it's free. I can find out if you're doing a great job, or I can find out if we need to do some work. And if we do find it, it could be 28%, it could be 21K, it could be 100K. We don't know until we dive in. But we find out where you're bleeding and we put the bandage back on.
So absolutely no cost to anybody. It's a free service, your free audit service, if you like.
Yep, it's free audit. You get your value report, and here's where we make money. And I'm going to be honest. So if we save you 100,000, I do have, our head office, right? If we save you 100,000, we're going to keep 50 of that. But if you're saving 50,000, if you're saving 100,000, what will that do to your Fridays? What will that do to your family life? What will that do for your business? It's money back into your pocket.
Yeah. Well, that's brilliant. And commend you for that. So we'll put that link, or how do we connect that offer with the listenership? Is it something, a unique link you're going to give us to put in the show notes, or? Absolutely.
I'll put that unique link in the show notes. You can also book a call with me at calendly.com/EGIUGGIO, and you're off to the races.
You're good to go. And what about just in general? You're obviously very strong on LinkedIn, so we can get Erika. Your LinkedIn profile is obviously pretty impressive, so people can get in contact you through there as well. Yeah,
absolutely.
And what about the website?
The website, if you scroll all the way down to the bottom, there is a contact form. It'll go right to my email.
Okay, brilliant. So just a little bit about yourself then, Erika, because people are probably intrigued. I have to say to you, like, your energy, you obviously have really a lot of entrepreneurship in your skill set. But just some random questions about yourself, if you don't mind, just to lighten it. Knowing what you know now, what would you do different in general?
What would I do different? I would hire the right people earlier on and bite the bullet. And what I mean by that is, in my first business, when I was in marketing, I hired a social media manager. And what I realized is that a social media manager cannot be a photographer. They're not an SEO specialist. Hire a team, a white labeled service or a consulting team to do the job that needs to get done, because you're pooling a bunch of skills together and people together with different mindsets to be able to achieve that effort. That's a big mistake I made earlier on. And yeah.
That is great advice. Tell me about a point of interest about yourself. Tell me something that no one would not really know about you, unless, like, you don't have to share some horror stories, but like, something that people wouldn't resonate with you, or people wouldn't go, I didn't know that about Erika.
So even though I do work these 60-hour days, I am an adrenaline junkie. And when the weekend comes around, I'm always doing different things. So I've done skydiving, whitewater rafting, parasailing, paragliding. Things can get, just like work, it can get a little bit, boring during the week. And on the weekend, I'm like, nope, that's it. See you later.
Okay. Well, the obvious one after that one would be favorite holiday destination. So seeing as you're an adrenaline junkie, I'm sure you're mixing that with your favorite holiday destination, and why. Okay.
Oh, this is a hard one, because I've gone to so many cool places, but I'm going to say either Spain or Italy, just because there's a lot of diverse things to do and you have a bit of everything. You have nature, you've got food, you've got, again, like, I can do all my adventurous stuff, and I do visit family, so it is kind of nice. But I would say for me, Europe in general, I've done 13 countries already. Each country has something to offer that the next one doesn't, and they're all different, and I would do it all again. if I could, if I had the time to do the tour that I did.
Brilliant. Listen, Erika, we loved having you on today. That was brilliant. I really enjoyed that podcast. Especially, the whole purpose of the podcast is to give back value to people so that they can be better business owners, to be, safer in terms of the risks and the commercial risks that they have within the business. And we do see a lot of construction owners that are struggling really, that are maybe only just about cutting it in terms of getting by, and they've got families to feed, and they've got, a lot of obligations on the table, and a lot of people are trusting them, and they have a lot of stress because of that. And if you can de-stress them by taking care of something that is obviously, as you explained, it's a no-brainer for you, but it is happening in businesses that they are forgetting to look at these areas, or go back, and maybe they don't have the time to go back and look at these areas. And I think it's a credit to you that you've identified that as a niche, and we wish you every success with that. And thanks very much for being on the show.
No, thank you so much for having me. It was a pleasure to come on.